Now, new tuberculosis treatment drugs that came out of the AIDS conference that was held in Australia have been received with mixed reaction. The PAMZ3 drug combo from the Global Alliance for TB Drug Development is said to cure the disease more quickly than current regimes. Now, to tell us more about this, we are joined by Professor Dida. He's the head of Pulmonology Division at the University of Cape Town. Professor, thank you very much for being our guest here on the program, and welcome to Morning Live.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, and good morning to all your viewers.
All right. Professor, what is so controversial about this? Well, give us the ins and outs about this.
Well, essentially what this study seeks to do is to evaluate whether a cocktail of three newer or new drugs can actually shorten the duration of TB treatment. And what was presented at the recent AIDS conference was some preliminary results from about 200 patients. The entire study looks at about 1,500 patients, so the final results will only be available in about 2 or 3 years' time. But what these initial results indicate is that the rate at which these new drugs kill the TB bugs, when you look at them in the sputum or the spit of TB patients, this rate of kill is faster than what is achieved with the current regimen which is being used. And what this suggests, it doesn't prove, but what it suggests is that this new cocktail of drugs might likely be successful in reducing the duration of TB treatment. Now, what they also proposing with this new cocktail of drugs is to simultaneously treat drug-resistant TB. Now, I think it's very encouraging news, in fact, these preliminary results. Of course, we need to wait for the final results. But if we can reduce the duration of TB treatment, then it means that a lot more people will likely complete treatment. It means less infectious cases and better TB control. I'm less optimistic about this cocktail of new drugs for drug-resistant TB. And the reason for that, in South Africa, as you and many of your viewers would know, multi-drug resistant TB or MDR-TB is a huge problem. And in fact, particularly in South Africa, our strain of drug-resistant TB is resistant, or MDR-TB rather, is resistant to one of the antibiotics used in this cocktail, pyrazinamide. So in fact, I would estimate that probably only a third, 30 or 40% of our patients might be sensitive to this particular drug, and therefore this regimen might be suitable only in a small proportion of our MDR-TB cases. The other problem with using this cocktail is that one of the drugs that are being used and that are critical to the regimen working doesn't have a standardized, reliable test available to evaluate susceptibility status of the drug. So I think it'll be quite challenging to use this for all MDR cases, but even if we use it appropriately for a small proportion of MDR cases, then I think that's a step in the right direction.
Okay, so what I'm gathering from you, now I understand why it was received with mixed reaction when it was announced that this new drug had been founded. But currently, when we have a look at what's happening with the treatment of TB, the side effects, I mean, are they quite harsh side effects? And will this new drug, and albeit a lot shorter treatment, will the side effects be a lot less severe?
Yes, well, the one problem with the current TB treatment is the duration of TB treatment, which is 6 months, and the other thing is side effects. So with the current TB regimen, there are lots of side effects, particularly flu-like symptoms, nausea, vomiting, and there are also more serious side effects such as liver toxicity and even kidney failure, though I must emphasize that this occurs in a small minority of patients. So having a newer regimen that is less toxic would definitely be advantageous. Now, if you thought that 6 months was long, for MDR-TB, the treatment duration is 24 months currently. Can you believe it? And for 6 of those 24 months, one has to take painful injections. And so it's not surprising that the successful treatment outcome rate with MDR-TB is less than 50%. And so, in fact, what we will be doing is our own study looking at a new injection-free regimen for MDR-TB. This is a study being led from the University of Cape Town and Medunsa, and it is funded by the South African MRC to the tune of about 17 million rand. and it will test a 6-month regimen for MDR-TB using another new drug called bedaquiline. And we will start recruiting patients probably in the last quarter of this year. Again, what we seek to do is to evaluate whether an injection-free 6-month regimen would work in MDR-TB. And of course, as I said, we hope that this would translate into much better outcomes for our MDR-TB patients.
Yeah. Just finally, Professor, I mean, it's such an intense conversation and I wish we had more time, but let's translate it here into South Africa. I mean, how is this going to assist us? Because we have a very high incidence of TB in the country.
Yes, so I think that's an excellent question. So I think before we even go to diagnostics and drugs, the key drivers of TB in this country are poverty, overcrowding, and of course HIV. And it was HIV that really drove quadrupling of our TB rates in the last 2 decades. Now, if you look at the West, Europe and the USA, substantial declines in TB rates, they occurred even prior to the advent of TB drugs. So really, if we don't address this issue of poverty and overcrowding through wealth creation and job creation and education, even with the best drugs, we'll never eradicate TB. Of course, the new drugs are a very positive finding because, as I said, if you have new drugs, then you can not only tackle MDR-TB, but also shorten the duration of TB treatment. It means more cases on treatment, less infectious TB cases, and therefore better TB control. The other worrying thing, just to mention, is that MDR-TB has now been overtaken by an even more resistant form of TB called XDR-TB. And in fact, now we have totally drug-resistant TB, where we have large numbers of patients in many provinces, as we showed in a research paper we published earlier this year in The Lancet, that in fact there are large numbers of patients in our TB hospitals that are incurable. And in fact are now being discharged back into our communities because we simply do not have effective drugs at the moment within our national TB program to treat these patients.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for talking to us. And I suppose a very, very a grand development that was happening at this World AIDS Conference that's taking place in Australia, and just talking about new treatment that could possibly be coming out to treat TB patients that brings time down significantly. And you heard the pros and cons from the professor, who is Kirtan Dida. He's the head of Pulmonology Division at the University of Cape Town.